like, here's this thing that I made, and they're like, what is that? And then they're like, cute. And then it's just like thrown underneath like a, like, oh yeah, I used that to prop up my table. It works so good.
That same one, because I like that one.
Yeah. Holy shit. That's so fire.
I think she'll like it.
Oh yeah.
So it might be as long ago as 2014, but it's at least, no, that's not one. So that's 2015. I knew I was already like fully doing them then. Oh, I remember then. This is the first Sharpie piece that I did, and I did it not as a study, but as like a let's see how this comes out, because I knew that I was going to make, or I was actually already in the process of making this as an oil painting, which is this. And so I moved to Paris in the winter of 2015, between February 1st and May 1st, I was there. And while working on this painting, which was going to take me 3 months of non-stop work, I needed to have some sort of a break from it. And I was like, oh, you know what I'll do? Is I'll try out this other method of making something just for fun. And that would be my downtime or my break from working on this. And so I made the Sharpie version of that. Were the, I think, 1 week long break that I took from working on the oil painting while living in Paris, and I made these. And they were so successful, so to speak, meaning like I was happy enough with the way that they turned out that from that winter of 2015 until now, I've consistently made Sharpie landscapes, and then I think the most recent one, which is the portrait of Stu, is the first and only figurative sort of portrait that I've done with Sharpie. All the rest were landscapes. Because I've done for years and years, I don't know why I say it like that, but sorry, for multiple different series, I've worked with different mediums to show where people have passed by, either graffiti on trees, spray paint on rocks, whatever it may be. There's this, like, the cluster of people traversing through different landscapes has always been exciting to me. And so, be it like photographs of these trees in Paris, or like these rocks with Venice gang graffiti in Los Angeles on a hike, I've made work about that. And so the Sharpie ones were sort of almost consistently about that. Until more recently, I just gave myself a little more freedom about what the Sharpie pieces contained, and figured if for no other reason than the enjoyment of it, I would attempt to do a portrait. Okay, so I shot this photograph of Stu, knowing that I wanted to like make a thing of it. And then I projected that photograph of Stu onto my wall and Sharpied in the, it would be the equivalent of like plotting in for a graph, where like I go around the periphery, or the perimeter of the form, and are like, okay, like this is his nose line, his lips, his chin, and like carve it out. And then once I have like the main points of, you know, dark shadow, hairline plotted in, then I'll turn the light on in the apartment, cue the projector down, and start going in to then figure out color balance of like, how am I going to be able to blend, you know, these 24 available colors of a Sharpie, that's just how many they make, into the most lifelike is not correct terminology. I guess I would say into the most like visually believable palette. Now, it doesn't have to be
color correct to the photograph or to his skin, but basically the way that the brain will interpret it as not looking awkward, for example, or reading naturally, is if the values are correct, even if the colors that you choose are completely incorrect. Like, for example, if it fluctuated between dark purple and light pink, and I strictly used those to represent things that were otherwise like brown or green, like whatever the actual human skin was, it would be completely fine as long as the darkest value was in the darkest space and the lightest value was in the lightest space. So you can translate colors as you see appropriate as long as they don't miss their mark of highlight, mid-tone, dark point. Therefore, using the Sharpies that I have available to me, it's okay if an orange is going to represent something that in human skin is much more subtle than the color that comes out of the Sharpie. As long as I maintain the value system of that orange, if it's a mid-tone, is going to sit next to another Sharpie color that is lighter and darker than it, so as to keep the viewer in a real space. That does fluctuate the tone correctly, which is why in stews, if you get up in there, those colors are very unhuman, especially because the nature of blending Sharpies, because the canvas will take a certain amount of saturation of the ink, so you can go over it, where if I lay down a pink and then lay down an orange on top, it manages to represent a third color as opposed to just the pink or just the orange. Therefore, I know that I have a little wiggle room with the layering, but nonetheless, any single color that goes down on there from the Sharpie box is going to be outside of the gamut of what human skin looks like. And therefore, it's more important to maintain the fluctuation between highlight, midtone, and dark than to try to accurately represent the color, because it still comes out as believable, even though it's a much more saturated, punched up color than you would see in real life. Yes, I make all the stuff for Iggy. It would be nice to have a team. It would be nice to have people doing all the bullshit. I mean, I don't like doing fulfillment, customs invoices, and all that stuff, but I have no qualms with making and spending a significant portion of my time every day working on the creative stuff for Iggy. I would be happy to bring people in maybe for creative stuff, but ultimately, I don't need it to be that big. I'm pretty sure that I would be capable of running all the creative indefinitely, because to me it's just an extension of an art practice. I don't really want, or I never even had at the peak of my art career, or the first peak, whatever, I never had assistants doing or making the artwork. I did at one point have assistants stretching canvas, sanding gesso on canvas, doing the task work that ultimately didn't require any creative integrity. It was just carry the box, blah blah blah. I would love to have stuff like that for Iggy the brand, because there is an unbelievable amount of time spent on the back end of it, which really does soak up a lot of my creative freedom or energy or time, whatever. But I don't really need someone to draw my pictures. I just need the rest of it. There's so much stuff that takes so much time that doesn't, it doesn't fulfill me. Well, I find that other people are usually better at giving short descriptions for the impetus for doing something. For me, it's impossible for me to separate any one of the things that leads to the making of something. Closing of the studio on Red Hook that I shared with other artists for several years as a collective-esque operation meant, one, I was going to be predominantly making work out of my home if I was going to make rectilinear things to hang on a wall. So one element of why I decided to make that documentary was because I was seeking out the most desirable way of making something that wasn't going to be a marginalized version of my current practice. So if I was working on paintings in a large studio space and now I was going to be making them in here, it seemed less enticing for me to shrink my scale and go through the same motions day to day than it would be for me to think of, well, how do I produce, how do I make, given like a new set of boundaries? And if I was going to be based from home and I wasn't going to have this responsibility to this studio environment, I thought, well, one, how do I make something out of that? Well, I thought video. And then for some reason, without completely being able to understand in the moment other than feeling a certain energy about it, it felt as though that summer was not necessarily the last time, because we all, for the most part, are only capable of relating our experience within our lifetimes, and it's like, I relate to Tompkins today because it's mine, even though like it was just as much someone else's, and they had similar romanticisms, issues, excitement like surrounding it. But for whatever reason, within my lifetime, the summer of 2016 felt like a poignant time to document what was happening. It felt like in many ways there was still an evenly distributed group of different socioeconomic classes. The crust punks and the homeless and the skateboarders alongside the incoming residents, the sort of volleyball playing, Starbucks drinking, sort of finance people, without having or without giving you my opinion of those different types of individuals. I felt as though they were clustering together for maybe one of the last times, all of them kind of profiting from the experience of the park. There's an ebb and flow throughout history where sometimes one group seems like more prevalent, or it seems unsafe, or safe, or this, or that. It really felt like a time in which this juxtaposition was meeting head to head, and I was really excited to document that with which was probably fleeting, meaning it was only a matter of time before you wouldn't be able to have access to sort of the fringe that is Tompkins, knowing that unless there's some sort of catastrophic economic event, the chances are that through city legislation, rent, gentrification, whatever the fuck you want to package it as, there will be a growing disconnect between classes, and ultimately the fringe will be pushed out as opposed to seeing it as a place that's representative of them, and therefore there being such a congregation of those people. It's only so long, and I sort of laugh about this from time to time, where I'm like, it's already gone. Like when you see, it's like, why do certain fringe groups still show up to Tompkins? It's as though they're living out a history that is no longer the present, in an attempt to like romance this lifestyle that's unavailable today. Where 2016, the summer, felt like I could still make an honest portrayal of a place that catered to a wide-ranging group of individuals, and I wanted to spend my time working on something outside. So it brought me in,
and it also felt as though it was necessary to do it at the time that I did. I've gone back, I mean, obviously I've gone back, I go back every fucking day to that place, and sometimes I relish in the fact that I made it, regardless of whether or not it's good or not, or that's even a real value to give. But I am excited about the fact that I made it when I did, because I don't think I could make that today. It doesn't feel the same. The energy, maybe it has something to do with my age, the people that I socialize with, but it was very natural to spend 8 hours a day for like 4 months in that park. It already would feel like I was designing myself around it if I were to attempt to cultivate that same amount of content right now. So yeah.
You! Do it. What? Do some shit. Here. Do it. Right now. All right, give me a countdown.
3,